Good afternoon. My name is Kathryn Whitehead. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations in 1948, provides that all people are free and equal in rights and dignity, establishing that people with mental disabilities and youth alike are protected by human rights law by virtue of their basic humanity. In the year 2009, in the United States, American-owned programs may privately detain youth for years at a time with none or poor government oversight and subject them to dehumanizing treatment by virtue of their age or perceived need to be reformed. This is my experience at such a program. Welcome to Montana. This is the first day of the rest of your life. When I arrived at Mission Mountain School at age 13, those words rung in my ears as I awaited my new and improved life to begin. Unbeknownst to me at the time was just how tragically prophetic these words were, in ways unimaginable. MMS was an unregulated private detention camp that called itself a therapeutic boarding school. Upon arrival, all of my belongings were taken, as they were considered reminders of an unhealthy life past that I had to let go of. This was part of their effort at chipping away our identities for the purpose of resculpting one that they could effectively control and manipulate. In my powerlessness and disorientation, I remained mute as my mom and I sat in group where each girl listed, as if in confessional, their history of abuse at the hands of others, their own abuse of others, or their abuse of substances, drugs, sex. This was followed by a few sentences indicating gratitude for the program. Surely they would have ended up in jail, institutionalized, or dead without it. It did not escape me that everyone indicated they had been abused and were an addict of some kind. Panic overcame me. I did not have these issues. I had been depressed and had attempted suicide. The apparent ignorance of these so-called counselors in their reductionist approach alarmed me even at 13. This would make sense to me years later as I came to understand that only one of the three founders who practiced therapy had some type of a degree in mental health. They had taken the principles of AA and corrupted them from a voluntary, non-coercive support group into a full-on pseudo-therapeutic philosophy. Once my mom left, I was immediately put into the day-to-day routine that would come to blur the 18 months I spent there into one continuous, mind-numbing, terror-filled day. Morning exercise, then breakfast, followed by chores, then morning group. Sometimes we would have 2 hours of school or forced labor, which they called work crew. Lunch was at noon, then another 3 hours of work or exercise, then dinner followed by more group. We never had more than 15 to 20 hours of class a week. Often we would be put on work crew as punishment, either individually or separately in lieu of school. To be clear, work crew was not easy. We built the school's fences, created pathways, picked rocks out of the driveway, picked tree stumps out of the ground, often all day, sometimes for months at a time as punishment. But at MMS, nothing was as it seemed. Everything had a euphemism, and the practices all sounded good. Punishment were called consequences, and the bizarrely artificial environment contained through social isolation, the use of peer pressure and group punishment was considered beneficial and looked something like what programs now call positive peer culture. Being constantly critical of one another sounded good, as we were, as they put it, holding each other accountable. Our reality was defined by the program, and there was always more to be said. If it was thought we were lying, we'd be placed on work crew, or be humiliated and confronted in group, pushing us further away from freedom and the promise of becoming good, healthy people. Our success was contingent upon what the staff, most notably the headmaster, John Mercer, believed to be true. He had the power to break someone into a shell of a person or lift them up by allowing them such privileges as to do work crew for him at his home. At MMS, many of us cried more in a week while there than our entire lives. If we didn't have something to cry about, we had to make sure we created it. Otherwise, we would be told we were not working the program. And at MMS, there was absolutely nothing worse than not working the program. The program was a cure for whatever the various issues we had that resulted in us getting there. Some girls reported a history of ritualistic abuse, of incest. One had smoked pot once. Some had mouthed off. A few had anorexia, bipolar disorder. The so-called treatment for all was the same. Work and exercise until exhaustion, talk and cry and talk about the past, and to continue to take your moral inventory daily. There was nothing empowering about this program. We were segregated from our families and community for 18 months or longer, censored, not afforded the rights to question the program, and robbed of our freedom of thought. We were rendered powerless. Unfortunately, probably not a surprise to anyone except perhaps some of the naive parents who were conned into paying $60,000 a year for these interventions that were akin to practices, those with mental disabilities in the 1950s and 60s, which led to the movement for deinstitutionalization, that these interventions were utterly unhelpful. I, not unlike many other students I've spoken with, left the program traumatized, experiencing nightmares, anxiety, and depression, ill-equipped to function in the world. It took nearly 5 years for me to even begin to think about my time there, and even longer to get past the fear of questioning these practices. Some have gone on to do well for themselves despite this trauma. Most have not. In fact, many continue to identify with their abusers and advocate for such unthinkable interventions. Stockholm Syndrome is a very real condition among survivors. It is as a result of my experiences and those of others that CAFETY was formed. These practices are not isolated to MMS. They are interventions sustained by a culture pervasive among the troubled teen industry and its stakeholders. Our work aims to demystify these practices and share their real-life impact. It is appalling and shameful that we as a society take no issue with such shows as Brat Camp. This does not surprise me, however, as I think back to a recent conversation I had with my educational consultant who recommended MMS to my mother. When I indicated John Mercer, the headmaster, did not have a degree in mental health, yet still ran therapy sessions, she informed me that he was working on a degree at this time and made the analogy that some of the best teachers are uncertified. While I can't speak to the merits of every educational consultant, those that I have reached out to have indicated that they do not refer to such programs. Yet, it seems to many that MMS is not that kind of program. And for some, neither are the programs you'll hear Chris and Nick talk about today. I'm unconvinced that enough has been done by this industry, and the broader cultural shift is yet to occur, where the public, the mental health community, and anyone working with youth calls into question long-term institutionalization, the use of kidnapping, what the industry calls escorts, the practice of censorship, and other types of practices that lay the foundation for the dehumanization of youth. When we speak to the importance of not undermining the dignity of youth, it is the practices which must be abolished. It is these practices that many of you can help combat. It is with great pride that I stand here today among fellow survivors and parents and continue to do the important work that will hopefully prevent another child from being subjected to coercive, non-collaborative care. It is my hope that every person here today will take this message of belief in the need for transformation and work to challenge this industry and the culture that belies it. Thank you.